So in the last couple of years, we've seen a lot of construction companies go bust, go out of business, fail, big ones all the way down to small ones. One of the things that I think a lot of these people make mistakes on is underestimating projects. We've seen a huge amount of that happen, where we get clients come to us and say they've got a project, it's been underestimated by someone else, and it's causing them problems. Why do you think so many construction companies and building firms are failing at the moment?
I think, like you said, with that, one of them things, something important to think about, all you need to do is miss a few items, a few high cost items that should have been there, that then the homeowner is expecting to be completed on their project, and they're not there. Whose pockets is that coming out of? It's coming out of contractors. It's easy enough to have something slide or something missed off, but if you're not picking up every single detail and all of the specifics on the project of the client's requirements, it's the contractor essentially who's going to have to pay, and then it's going to be eaten into their profits.
Yeah, and then that leads them into problems, and you only need one or two projects like that, and it'll lead you into failure. I think picking up off the back of that, what we see a lot is people not actually having contracts.
Yeah.
And because they don't have contracts, it leads to them litigation issues, adjudication issues, mediation issues, because there's no contract, there's no boundaries around what actually should be happening on site. And when you've got an estimate that is not where it needs to be, and you then also don't have a contract, that's going to lead to some pretty big disaster.
Yeah, well, they've got nothing to fall back on with that. So in a contract, you might put some clauses in or qualifications in. If there's no documents supporting around the contract with no estimate or costings around that, as soon as the client starts asking for XYZ and they're not valid to put a variation through, or they change design or something changes down the line, and they're running into issues with something like ground conditions, again, whose pocket's it coming out of? Because in the client's mind, they were given a cost, that's their fixed cost, and essentially they're trying to lean back on the contractor to pick up the pieces, where it's again eating into their cost, which isn't what their need. So contract in place, definitely something that they need to keep an eye on.
All these things lead to failure in business, to failure in construction companies. One thing that we also see is a massive lack of communication, and that leads to poor project management. And when you have poor project management, that's also going to lead to major problems. If you've already got a project that hasn't been priced properly and you haven't got a contract, and then there's communication issues or project management issues, that even creates even more issues.
Yeah, there's a lot of people in the pipeline on it. You need the contractor to be speaking to all parties, including the client, the architect, engineer. They need to make sure the right things are in place and the right people are in place to make sure the project's smooth running. Even with keeping in contact with their suppliers, they need to make sure their lead times are correct, so they're not falling behind schedule and then being hit with liquidated damages, something like this, which is again could be why they're failing. If they're failing to keep on top of the site and keep it running smoothly and on track, again, they're going to be running into issues. Client's going to be unhappy, and they'll be running into further problems which could be avoided if they've got the right things in place at the start.
Even communication with the client, because if there are problems on site, you need to be communicating it so the client understands that these are the problems, this is where there might be some extra costs. Otherwise, you're swallowing all the costs, and again, that leads to business failure, construction companies failing because bad estimates, no contracts, with the lack of communication, no project management. It's all issues that lead to these businesses going out of business effectively, and it's a massive problem. I think it all stems from that estimating piece. If you get that estimating piece wrong, it's going to cause you problems all the way through. And I feel like people try and save money and find the cheapest way of tendering a project, don't want to invest in that bit, but then that bit is the bit that's going to either make you a profit, or it's the bit that's going to cost you your business. in the worst scenarios, if you don't invest in that well, and if you don't have the right QSs, the right estimators on board doing the work that they need to be doing.
I think neither the contractor or the client want to run into surprises. So making sure everything's correctly estimated at the front end's highly important, because if not, any unforeseen costs, the client's not going to want to pay it, the contractor's not going to pay it, but it's there in the information. So why has it not been picked up? Something like this, again, it's important to make sure it's accounted for at the front end, just for the most smooth running of a project, which is what everyone wants.
Yeah, I think when you look at it, people might underquote a project, and then they're chasing their tail all the way through the project, and then what they're doing, they're cutting corners.
Yep, compromising quality,
and then the client's unhappy, and this is all because the estimating QS process pre-contract hasn't been done correctly. So that one piece of the puzzle, although it might seem small, or you might think, oh, you know what, I don't think I'm going to win this project, or I'm not sure if I'm going to win this project, so I don't really want to invest the money or spend the money on it. It can be the bane of your life for 6, 12, 18, 24 months, however long the project's going for. And it can lead to disaster. And that's why a lot of companies are failing. You know, when you look at the last couple of years, we're seeing things in the industry fluctuate so much. Labor rates, material rates, they fluctuate hugely. And if you haven't got the right pricing in place, if you haven't got the right fluctuation clauses in place in your contract, it's going to lead to disaster. And that's why we're seeing so many companies failing, because they're not getting the fundamentals and the basics right. And they're not picking up on what they should be doing.
I think it's definitely important to keep up to date. Again, markets moving, trends changing, anything like this that's constantly moving, the costs are changing with it. So keeping in touch with sort of local suppliers, specialists, even any subcontractors you tend on going out to. If you've got a specialist package, you can't just assume they're doing the same rates and the same price for each job, because each job carries its own challenges. And with the markets changing, it's quite easy to say, okay, we'll go ahead with these same costs, but without getting them verified and checked as things are changing at the same time, you don't want to run into any issues with that.
There's clearly a labour shortage as well everywhere. A labour shortage on site with skilled tradespeople, trying to find the right people. That's what's driven prices up as well. So, you know, if you tender a project and it's a 2-year project, what you've tendered it at, or what you've done an estimate at 18 months ago, you effectively need to hold them prices, and it makes it very difficult. It's a challenging environment, but I think the conclusion we're coming to here is that if you don't get your estimating right, and you don't get your pre-contract piece of the puzzle correct and bang on, it's going to cause you a problem. It's going to lead you into difficulty, and it might not sink the boat. It might just have an impact on the business in the short term, but there's every chance that it could actually sink the boat as well, because it's only a concoction of things that need to go wrong, and everything could fall apart. And that's what's happening out there. It's because people are forgetting the fundamentals. They want to get onto site so quickly, they skip through the bits that are really fundamental. They skip through the bits that should be done and need to be done accurately, thoroughly, need to be done by professionals, people that understand what they're doing, QSs, estimators, and people are flying through that piece to try and get things to site. And then effectively, when a construction company goes bust, it doesn't just leave that company in a predicament. It also leaves all the people that are relying on that company to do a project also in a predicament, because if you're halfway through a project and your contractor goes bust, trying to get another contractor to finish that project is an absolute nightmare.
To pick up the rest of the
because they don't want to.
Yeah.
They don't know what's going wrong. They don't know what's happening. So it leaves a predicament for everyone. So that initial due diligence, making sure everything's right, getting the tenders right, getting the contracts right, tender analysis, it's hugely, hugely important.
Yeah, I think even with that being said, like you're saying, all of that's a very time consuming process. That's not something you can do quickly or overnight. You can't rush getting all the information in, checking through the schedule, checking through the spec, checking your rates with any of your suppliers, going through all these parts, writing your contract up. It's not something that's a quick process, but it needs to be done thoroughly and correct. And it's something a lot of the contractors always haven't got their time to do. Working through that and rushing around it through sort of still getting through your workload is something, again, they usually reach out to professionals for to have it done.
or they don't, and then they're trying to they're throughout the whole project they're just picking up the pieces
Exactly.
and trying to make the best of a bad situation.